There's a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than any words. It lingers in a glance, a sigh, or the way someone always looks out the window at exactly the same time every day. Some stories, they live buried in the quiet, and sometimes they only come to light when it's almost too late. Today, I want to tell you about someone who carried a story for 70 years, a story of love, loss, duty, and a single promise he never broke until the very end. Make yourself comfortable. You might find a little bit of your own family in this story. His name was Walter. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him as the man who fixed clocks, not the digital kind, but the ones with winding keys and gears that ticked softly like whispers from another time. Walter lived alone, in a small house with peeling paint, a creaky porch swing, and a front yard filled with dandelions. Children brought him broken watches, and he'd fix them for free. Teenagers avoided his yard, calling him the timekeeper with a laugh. But inside Walter's house was a museum of memories, mantel clocks, pocket watches, cuckoos, and one curious photo he always kept turned down. No one had ever seen what was in the frame. They asked, of course, family? An old friend? Walter would just smile and change the subject. That photo, it meant something, but no one knew what. One winter, a bad storm knocked out the power in the neighborhood for 3 days. Neighbors checked in on each other, bringing soup and candles, knocking on doors. Walter's light never came on. When someone finally knocked, he answered with his usual warm eyes, wrapped in an old army blanket. "I'm all right," he said. "Storms don't scare me anymore." But something was different. His hands shook more than usual. His breathing was shallow. After the power came back, a young man named Jake, who often helped Walter carry groceries, offered to bring him a meal. Walter agreed. They sat in silence until Walter spoke. "Jake," he said, "do you believe people can wait their whole life for something and never stop?" Jake hesitated. I think some people do, but not many." Walter nodded. "I waited. I never told anyone why." Then he walked to a drawer, pulled out an old yellowed envelope, and handed it to Jake. "Open it when I'm gone," he whispered. Walter passed away quietly the following week. No funeral, just a quiet gathering of neighbors who lit candles and told stories about the timekeeper. Jake remembered the envelope. He opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman in a nurse's uniform, standing by a military tent. Her name was Margaret, and there was a letter, written in ink that had faded with time. The words were full of longing. "My dearest Walter, the war has taken you from me, but I know you will come back. If this letter finds you, I will be waiting at the train station in Boston every Friday at noon, until I see you again. Love, Margaret." And at the bottom, a note added later in Walter's handwriting. "I went, every Friday, until the station closed in 1972. Jake sat in stunned silence. This quiet man, who never spoke of war or love or loss, had carried this heartbreak for over 50 years. Every week, he waited. She never came. Over the weeks that followed, people learned more about Walter than they ever knew when he was alive. He had served in World War II, been injured in France, and was hospitalized for almost 2 years in Europe. By the time he returned home, letters from Margaret had stopped. He never found her, never married, never even left town. But every Friday, without fail, he took the bus to the station. Neighbors began piecing it together. Why Walter never scheduled repairs on Fridays. Why he always wore his nicest shirt once a week. Why his eyes always looked a little heavier by the evening. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was devotion. Real, unshakable devotion. We live in a world that moves so fast, we often forget that the strongest stories are the quietest ones. We think love is found in grand gestures, but sometimes it's in the quiet act of waiting. In showing up, week after week, without being seen or thanked. Walter's life may have seemed small, even lonely. But what he held on to was bigger than most of us can imagine. He didn't need an audience. He just needed to keep a promise. Even if no one else knew about it, even if it broke his heart a little more each time. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real love looks like. If you made it this far, thank you for spending this time with me. Walter's story isn't just his. It belongs to every soul who's ever waited, hoped, or held onto a promise. Do me a favor today. Call someone you love. Ask an old neighbor about their story, because the quietest people often carry the loudest truths. And sometimes, they just need someone to ask. Until next time, take care. And remember, wisdom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, waiting to be heard.